can do it again. All right, I would like to invite back Deacon Peggy Hahn one more time for today.
Good afternoon. Can you guys hear me? There it is. Good afternoon. How are you? You feeling good? Tired. Some of you were in the Zen workshop with me, and you're probably pretty relaxed right now, right? What other workshops did you have? What is that? Barnga. I don't know what that is. Awesome. I can't tell you. Okay. But we've had great workshops then this afternoon. Thank you for taking time to be a learning community. You know, as we spend time learning, we have the opportunity to grow ourselves as leaders and therefore grow others. Before I jump into this session, I don't want to miss the chance to point out that if, as I describe this information about the practice of adaptive leadership, you're thinking, I'd really like to learn more, that we have coming up an opportunity with 6 other denominations, and it's in the last page of your workbook, an invitation for pastors and groups of lay leaders to engage in something we're calling Another Way. This looks like a morning with adaptive leadership introduction, an afternoon working on case studies, followed by you working with a coach doing case study work for the next 3 months. Friends, this is how you take a big idea and you put it into action. And so as we're talking about this, I wanted to begin this session with pointing out the fact that your bishop and the representatives of 6 other denominations are saying this is very important. And we don't just want to give you stuff to think about, we want to help you put the rubber on the road, okay? So that's what this is about here. Hopefully you do have a workbook. We're going to be using it in this session, and we're on page 6 as we get started now. So we're continuing our conversation about what it is to be living at a time where we're called to make sacred shifts. And we're going to take the practice of adaptive leadership, that opportunity to observe, to interpret, and to intervene a little more deeply into ourselves now, into what it means to be a leader in the church, whether we are a professional leader who is paid to be on a congregational staff, or we are a lay leader who is generously offering our time and our gifts. One thing that's really important to know about where we are in this season of leadership of the church is that if you are here as a lay leader, would you raise your hand? Your ministry is primary. Please hear me say that. Your ministry for the future of your church is primary. This is not about professionalized Christian leadership. What I'm talking about is for you, okay? This is really important. It's for all of us. Here's the thing. Life is fragile. It's fragile for all of us. It doesn't matter where you live. It doesn't matter who you are. Our lives are fragile. I mean, maybe you are a person who was born into a family where you didn't always have enough to eat. I don't know. Or maybe you're a person who was born into a family where you were a child, but yet you were still the most adult-like person in that household. Or maybe you are someone who was part of an opportunity to not actually make it onto the team you wished you would have gotten into as a child. Or maybe you didn't get to play on that chair in the band that you wished. Or maybe you are a person for whom you didn't get the job that you needed or thought you were qualified for or hoped to get. Or honestly, maybe you didn't keep the job. Maybe you've lost your job. I've lost my job. That can be hard. Maybe you're a person who's just become aware that you have a child who is dealing with an addiction issue. Or maybe it's you. Maybe you are a person who is grieving because of a crisis where somebody in your life has died too soon. Today is the funeral for my friend Rachel Held Evans, died too soon. Maybe you have somebody in your life like that. Life is fragile. Or maybe you have a child who has disabilities, whether it's emotional or physical or other challenges. That means that you will be the adult caregiver of that child for the rest of your life or their life. See, life, it's really fragile. And all of us have a story within us about the places in which we have experienced this kind of brokenness and this kind of pain and reality. I want you to imagine that narrative, that footprint that is uniquely yours, is a container that holds your story. A story that only you know about, that's only within you. Can you go with me in that you are that there is a container that contains a box, if you will, that holds your life story? Go with me in this thinking, okay? All of us have that kind of a space that holds our story. And the fact of the matter is, we carry that with us everywhere we go. Sometimes we admit it, and sometimes we don't. Sometimes we bear our story out loud, but most of the time, most of us hold this inside. I've done it. I bet you've done it. I mean, I can stand here and say, as a public Christian leader, I was part of a marriage where it was abusive. And yet, you know what? Nobody around me really knew that was going on. I just looked like a normal person on the outside. And on the inside, it wasn't really going well. Maybe you've been that kind of leader too. Maybe you've had stuff going on in your life you haven't told the truth about, sometimes even to the people closest to you, sometimes even to yourself. Because, see, life is fragile. And sometimes it's hard for us to admit this. Because once we start doing that, who will trust us? And when leaders are like that, when we hold our stories inside of us, and we keep our pain and our brokenness inside of us, and we don't let anybody know what's going on in our hearts, that's what we take with us to church. That's the way we practice our faith too. And when the church practices its faith as if everything is fine, then the people who are coming because they're hurting and they're broken, they can't find Christ in you, in me. You know, I've noticed that the more I'm willing to share about my pain, about the struggles I've faced in my life, the more vulnerable I'm willing to be, the more it frees other people to tell their truth. Have you ever discovered that? And yet, as a church, when we act church nice, you know what I mean? Like we have it all together and we have these kind of superficial relationships with each other. How are you? Fine. It's not working for us. It's keeping people from knowing us, and they think we're hypocrites. They do. They look at Christ, they look at Jesus' life, and they see the brokenness. They see the pain, they see the cross. And they look at the church, and they see us kind of going through the motions. You see the challenge here? The more that we have the courage to open up who we are to each other, to ourselves, to each other, and to the people in our own congregations, the more we have the chance that others will want to stick around, will want to be part of our faith community. This is the truth. So I'd like to do a little personal reflection with you I know it's tired time in the afternoon, but you can do this. I have faith in you. You can go here with me. What I'd like you to do is to think for a moment in your own life. When is a time that you have felt hated? When is a time that you have felt loved? I mean really loved for who you are. When is a time that you have felt despair? Be honest about that. When is a time that you have felt real hope? All of us carry this within the container of our lives. All of these things. And if you think the word hate is too strong of a word, you probably are a white person, you probably are from a middle-class community, and you're probably a man. Sorry. But not necessarily true, right? Because all of us can experience all of these feelings. So I want to have a moment as an assembly. What an audacious thing to ask you to be this real with yourself in a space like this. I want to ask you to do that. So in your workbook on page 4, those questions show up here. And we're going to do this privately. Oh, I'm sorry, page 6. Thank you. We're going to do this privately. I am going to invite you later to talk about this, but I am not going to invite you to share what you write. So this is for you, okay? This is personal. Take a minute and tell the truth to yourself about these times in your life, please. Let's do that now. We have this window of opportunity, friends, to engage the pain and the suffering in the world around us as we own up to what's going on in our own lives. You know, when I first interviewed Pastor Sarah Yoder, she's the pastor of a congregation in Edgewater, Maryland, about her congregation working with LEAD, she said, oh, by the way, we've got these metal buildings on the property, and they're filled with junk. They're resale shops, really. And the community comes in and I don't know what they do with it. But actually, the congregation has nothing to do with this. We wish it would just disappear. And I thought, wonder what that's about. And then her congregation listened to God in scripture and prayer. And they listened to God in the congregation. And they went out in the neighborhood and they listened. And one of the questions they asked people in their neighborhood is, what do you know about Joy Reigns Lutheran Church? And guess what they said? We know the resale shops. We know the very thing that your congregation would rather avoid. And the more they listened, the more they heard it. And they had to come back to the congregation and sit down at the table and admit that they were overlooking something that mattered, but they didn't want to face it. So they went back out and listened deeper. Forget the resale shop. Let's listen more to what's going on in the community. They continued to look past it. And as they listened into their community, they discovered that Edgewater, Maryland, has the highest, within the first 4 cities in Maryland, and in the top dozen of cities in the United States, the biggest opioid addiction crisis known in this country. And this congregation that has less than 120 people in worship thought, we can't deal with this. This is too big for us. You know, an opioid addiction crisis here in Edgewater is not going to be what we're called to pay attention to. But they kept listening, and they kept hearing more about it. And finally, they decided they needed to take it seriously. So they started listening to other organizations that were dealing with the opioid addiction crisis. And it was overwhelming. So 2 years ago, they decided they would bring in people from these organizations that are embracing the opioid addiction crisis to speak to the congregation during the Wednesday night Lenten services, basically to bring the message. And these groups came. And as Lent unfolded, Pastor Sarah said, people kept coming to her saying, you know, my brother, he died of an opioid addiction. My daughter, she died of an opioid addiction. And once they started saying this, she realized in the short time she'd been in that congregation, like about 4 years at that time, that almost every funeral that she had done since she had been in that congregation was attached to this crisis. It was them. They were, in fact, the community, and they were dealing with it, but everybody had their church nice on, and no one was talking about it. And so they decided they had to be the church that paid attention to this, and they began to do the work. She and her family moved into a different place, and they did a capital fund campaign to turn the parsonage into a recovery center. And they, by the way, raised way more money than they set out to raise. Remember I said I was going to talk to you about raising money? Here's what they did. They did a capital fund campaign to do a bunch of renovations in the church and in the parsonage so that they could serve the community. And guess what? The community helped fund the campaign. About a third of the people who participated weren't members of the church. They were shocked. They raised more money than they needed. We don't hear that every day, do we? And this congregation continues to sort this out. And so about 6 months ago, Pastor Sarah said, I wish you would just meet with us on Zoom, because we've done our purpose statement and clarified our core values, and you just kind of need to hear them and give us some advice. So I said, okay, fine. She emailed me the information. I took a look at the email, and I thought, really? Okay. So we get in the Zoom meeting, and I said, so you guys, I read everything, and I've got to be honest. It sounds like Church Anywhere. I mean, their mission statement was like blah, 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 Christian church. I could have pasted it in your place. Is your mission statement like that? Yeah, most of them are. So they actually were saying something like, you know, Christ's love will be known or something. I mean, nothing really shocking, right? Something we hope is true of a Christian church. But they were saying nothing about their commitment to healing and hope around the opioid addiction issue. And so I just had to say the truth. I said, you guys, this is great, but it could be anywhere. What are you going to do to represent what I know you're passionate about and what you're actually raising money to do and what you're actually committed to do? And one woman at the table in the Zoom meeting looked at the pastor and she said, Pastor, are we going to be known as the church that cares about opioid addiction? Is that our purpose? And to her credit, Pastor Sarah looked at this woman in the eye and she said, you know, for now we are. That's it. This is our call. Until God calls us somewhere else, this is it. She took a deep breath, and the rest of them looked at each other, and they realized they had to own it all the way to the core. This is not an arm on the body. This is the body of our ministry. This is the point of why we exist. And they're working at getting all the way into this. If she was standing here telling you her story, she would tell you it's not a walk in the park. They're wrestling with it, and it's becoming who they are as a whole way of being. If you ever want to check it out, go on Facebook, look for Pastor Sarah Yoder. She posts the stats every month on what's going on with the opioid addiction issue. And when I saw it on Friday, it was still, last week, it was still that Edgewater is number 4. And she feels like until they move the needle on that, that's what they're doing. That's her story of transformation, of taking the adaptive challenge of how our church has observed, has interpreted, and is creating an intervention. I wonder what that's like at your place. How is your congregation responding to this window of opportunity? What are you observing? What are you intervening with or interpreting, and what are your experiments? I want to invite you to the microphone. Some of you are doing this. I know you are. Let's tell each other what we're doing. Let's learn from each other so that this synod can be a learning community from the ways in which you yourself are helping people engage in the real pain and suffering and brokenness of our world. Will you do it? Come on. Thank you, Pastor Drew.
Yeah, I'm Pastor Drew Ingram, and I'm at Spirit in the Hills Lutheran Church in Spicewood, just west of Austin. And I have the wonderful honor and pleasure to help facilitate some of this lead stuff, and so I brought that into our congregation. And as we've done some of this listening, we use Lead's annual roadmap for our council retreat. And when we got together for the first time, we were doing this. Between the night one and next morning, there's this big news story that the Lake Travis School District had significantly higher rates of mental illness, suicidal ideation, mental health challenges, kids that were feeling incredible anxiety. And this is something that's happening across the nation, but even in a specific way in ours. And so that next morning, everybody's like, hey, did you see about the youth risk behavior survey? And we talked about it for a long time, and just at the point of it doesn't happen overnight. It didn't end up in one of our annual goals. But when we got back together this year to do the same process, it came up without the news story coming up. And so we're starting some mental health ministry and trying to figure out what that looks like, knowing that we have a theology of grace that welcomes people as they are, the fullness of their brokenness. We have a congregation with a rich history in its earliest days of sharing really vulnerably with one another. When we were just a mission congregation and 25 people, 30 people, they still tell stories of how so-and-so, how David French told his story and it impacted everybody and opened them up to share, right? So we have the skills and the knowledge, and we've heard God calling us to do in these different ways. And we're not sure if it's going to be our thing, but it's certainly a thing we're working on right now. So the goal this year is to learn what it means to be a better community resource and better community for those with mental health challenges, and to take one step toward doing that. And we've already hit that goal, and we're just trucking right along.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think his point is well made. This is not a fast thing, right? Not unlike Pastor Sarah Yoder over a 3-year window and this congregation shifting, and it's still shifting. She would say they're not there yet. What have you got?
I am with Abiding Love in Austin. We have a group of churches, ELCA congregations in Austin, united by the fact that we are uniquely doing ministry in urban Austin, Texas. Call ourselves Austin City Lutherans. And a number of years ago, looking at shared strengths and abilities that congregations have spiritual gifts just like people do, we came up with the idea that a lot of us had a significant commitment to feeding ministries, food supplement, nutrition supplement, and that gave rise to the expression that we call Bread for All, which is a food pantry now in East Austin, a relative food desert in our city. And we had a summit about a year and a half ago, going on 2 years ago, where we wanted to look at what the next steps in this kind of an expression could be, and we realized that most of our communities had some significant focus in education, particularly in preschool education. And responding to a comment that just kind of still rings in the air, our former police chief, Art Acevedo, who's now in Houston at the South by Southwest Education Forum prior to that festival, now going in 2017, Art made the comment that the difference between children graduating from high school and going on to college and children dropping out of high school and going on to prison is preschool education.
Yes.
And so we have come together now as Austin City Lutherans with partnerships with Parks and Rec and with Health and Human Services and with Austin Independent School District. And we're creating a preschool in this same area that happens to be a food desert, also happens to be an education desert, the area of greatest need in our cities. So together we're finding that there are opportunities that are bigger than any of us could tackle on our own. And we're finding great energy for congregations that have needed to stretch their ministry and mission wings in particular again. So we're looking at what these next expressions might be for us and are happy to talk with potential partners and other congregations or synod groups, conferences that want to try to do a similar kind of thing. But it seems to be working for us.
Thank you for sharing that. The research is very clear, the role of early childhood education as a deterrent from prison. That's right. I see somebody else coming to microphone number 1 who's been waiting. Please. We'll come here next to 3.
Cada iglesia, comunidad, tiene diferentes retos, diferentes dificultades. Yo soy el vicario de la iglesia de San Lucas, allá en Eagle Pass, que es frontera con México, como todos saben. El pastor Eric tal vez me traduce un poquito.
Thank you, Pastor Eric, for translating. Yeah.
He is a vicar in Eagle Pass, Texas, and he's going to tell us about his experience there.
Como decía, todos tenemos diferentes retos a los que nos enfrentamos. Ahora nosotros como iglesia fronteriza también tenemos que dar respuesta a una situación que está sucediendo ahora mismo en las fronteras.
We all have different challenges that we're facing, and his church, as a church that is right there at the border, has a new challenge that they're facing right now.
Diariamente están entrando entre 100 y 150 personas, ¿verdad?, de diferentes países como es El Salvador, Guatemala y Honduras.
Every day, from 100 to 150 people are coming through his side of the border in Eagle Pass from different countries like Honduras, El Salvador, and Guatemala.
Y cada noche, entre las 6 y las 7 de la noche, entre 50 y 75 personas se quedan sin techo y quedan en la calle.
And every night, from 50 to 75 people have to be sleeping on the street because they have nowhere to stay after they are going through the detention center in the Rio.
Y nosotros como iglesia luterana y nuestra misión, como dice, la oportunidad de servir, pues hemos abierto nuestras puertas de la iglesia para poder darle hospedaje, comida y muchas cosas más que ellos necesitan.
Thank you. last thing he said is, we as a Lutheran church are using our facilities as shelter for these people as they have to spend the night under a safe place.
Tratamos de dar una respuesta, ¿verdad?, a estas personas que lo necesitan. Estamos, por supuesto, en unión con el sínodo, el pastor Eric, que es nuestro encargado, y estamos tratando de dar respuesta. Tenemos un edificio, ¿verdad?, en nuestra parte de la iglesia que lo hemos habilitado de emergencia para poder dar hospedaje a entre 20 a 25 personas diarias.
We have a building in the back of the church, and we are serving these people from 20 to 25, you said? But you have received up to 40, am I right? ¿Tú has recibido hasta 40?
Sí, hasta 40, sí, un máximo
okay.
40.
I'm sorry, there are different languages here. So they're working together with the Synod, and there has opened their doors to receive these people. ¿Cómo ha trabajado la cuestión adaptativa?
¿Perdón?
¿Cómo has trabajado la cuestión adaptativa?
No te escuché la...
¿Cómo has trabajado la cuestión adaptativa para la iglesia?
Adaptativa, sí. Bueno, a pesar de todo eso, dentro de la misma comunidad hemos tenido ciertas resistencias, ¿verdad? Como decía al principio, cuando una situación de amor, una situación de odio, ¿verdad? Y se ha encontrado toda esa situación, ¿no? Entonces hay personas que se han como opuesto un poco a la misión, ¿verdad? Pero entendiendo, ¿verdad?, lo que se decía, cómo ponerse en la posición de comprender también las otras mentalidades.
Now he just explained how he's facing some resistance from inside his own congregation, and that it is his adaptive challenges. Right now, changing the values of the congregation for the whole congregation to understand what he's doing with these asylum seekers.
Y otra cosa muy positiva también es la unidad que hemos tenido entre las iglesias, la iglesia católica romana, la iglesia bautista, la iglesia metodista, ¿verdad? Y otras iglesias particulares. Nos hemos unido para dar respuesta a esta situación.
A positive point that he wants to use as a remark is that Catholic, Methodists, Baptists, and Lutherans are working together to support this process in Eagle Pass.
Wow, can we give them a hand for this?
Gracias.
That's truly adaptive work, truly adaptive work.
Hi, I'm Jan from Good Shepherd in Bastrop. And about 12 years ago, our congregation, the people decided that it was time to offer a Mother's Day Out program. So it started out as a one-day program. It changed and evolved to a 5-day program. And then we decided that it was time to make it real and official and started Little Sheep Learning Center. We had preschool, learning center and preschool, everywhere from 6 weeks to jumping off to kindergarten. And that started as about 20 children, and it's up now into like 112.
Wow.
We started doing after-school programs, and then we started doing summer programs, and everything that we've decided and discussed and discerned over and have done, then it's kind of the analogy, build it and they will come. So recently, within the last couple of years, we've decided that it's time to look at possibly a Lutheran school. So we decided that it's time to go kindergarten through 2, through 2nd grade. And enrollment has started for this year. We have, I think the last count was 15 kindergartners and 5 children from the 1st and 2nd grade. So we're pretty well landlocked and have been fighting with the city of Bastrop, which is normal for us, to fight with our cities. So we're bringing in a portable classroom, putting it in the back play yard. And we, have run into all sorts of obstacles. But the interesting part is to see where we were 12 years ago with a one-day program for Mother's Day Out, and to see how excited the congregation got and engaged in creating a learning center and preschool. And for then about 10 years, it's just been bumping along and growing, but just kind of on its own and increasing. And then all of a sudden to see everyone who is so engaged and so excited, and to see the Lutheran preschool or the Lutheran school start to take shape in our tiny little community of Bastrop. And it's all because of the need to take care of the children and to give them a place for good Christian education.
Thank you so much. Yeah, this is great. We'll take one more story, and I want to say, did you know this about each other already? You're learning some things about each other, right? Let's look at microphone 1.
Hi, I'm Beverly Teal from Trinity in San Antonio. We're 107 years old, and our members are almost that old. So we are a very small congregation. We average about 35 to 40 people in attendance each Sunday. But we are a very active and a very generous group for our community. We have not done things on the scope of what you've heard, but we feel that we've done so much for our community that I want to brag about our members. We get school supplies for our local school district. We provide clothes for the children's shelter. We have a cooperative agreement with St. Vincent de Paul. We make donations to them, and then when people come in the community and need help with food or paying electrical bills or what have you, we refer them to them. So we have that cooperative agreement with them. We get fans for the elderly in the summertime. We provide donations for the food bank, and we go out and do God's work, our hands, in various places in the community, one of which has been the food bank. And we are involved in the Meals on Wheels. We provide Thanksgiving baskets for the needy in the community, and we have a wonderful prayer blanket ministry. And we have a quarterly blessing of these blankets, and we generally average around 100 blankets each quarter. And they are distributed to people on Meals on Wheels. They're distributed to people in nursing homes. They're distributed to people in our congregation that have family members or even themselves that are going through some trials and tribulations with health or what have you. So they're available for them. And then we provide festivals for the community where we actually get the community people on our property, and they can see the things that we are providing and have them in to have an enjoyable day with us. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So we've got a taste of all this already happening around us, and I'm guessing many of you who didn't stand up and speak have stories within you to share. Thank you for speaking if you were willing to do that. Now I want to ask you to do a little activity with me. You've got in your workbook on page 7 a little tic-tac-toe. Actually, you've got 2 of them side by side. I want you to start with the one that has you in the middle. And I want you to help think about who are the people who live around you in your own neighborhood. Now, you may live in an apartment building, but there are still people who live around you. Or you may live in a rural community, so you may have to skip the river or go a mile or 2, okay? I get that our geography is not all like a city block. But wherever you live, See how many of these blocks you can fill in. How many of the people do you know who live around you? And if you don't know their names, maybe you can wonder what you know about them. Family with 2 kids, whatever. Okay? Go to work on this for a minute, please. Okay, you guys have it? How many of you can fill in all 8 blocks? We have a few. You guys are amazing. This is very rare, and I'm excited to see that we have some people who truly do know. And would you say you have a relationship with the people in your 8 blocks? Raise your hand again if you really know them, not just know something about them. Nice. Okay. How many of you filled in, let's say 5 blocks? We'll just get down to 5. Okay. 4? Good. 3? 2? Okay. If you were unable to fill in any of the names, you don't have to raise your hand, but what I'd like to do is use this activity as an encouragement for you to take the moment to reach out to get to know your neighbor. Now, friends, this really matters. It really matters that we know people who live around us, and honestly, that they know us, right? Not only do we not know when we can help them, but we don't know when they might need to help us. Now, I happen to live in Houston, and like many of you in this synod, I experienced a lot of flooding with Hurricane Harvey. Are there others in this room who had flooding with Hurricane Harvey? Yeah. Maybe not you personally, but people in your area? Right. If there is a reason to know your neighbors, it's because of natural disaster, right? But there's many others. When I was going to bed the night before Hurricane Harvey, it actually was already your way and moving back out into the Gulf. What a crazy hurricane, right? That we got to have it twice in Texas. And moving back out into the Gulf, I was getting ready to go to sleep, and I was locking my front door, and I looked across the street, and I saw my neighbor's light was on. And I wondered why. See, she is a over 80-year-old Indian woman whose her daughter lives just, about 10 minutes away, which I know. And so I called her, and I said, Roop, that's her name, Roop, why are you home? And she said, Peggy, I'm fine. I said, seriously, Roop, why aren't you with your daughter? And she said, listen, I'm fine. I'm like, okay, I get it. But in the morning or any time during the night, if you need us, if you're not fine, we're here. So we went to sleep that night, and honestly, it was raining, but there was no real water on the street. I woke up in the morning to Roop calling us. We hadn't set the alarm, but the phone was ringing. And I said, hello? And the answer that came back to me was this: I'm not fine. I knew it was Roop. And I said, what's going on? She said, there's a little water in my house. I'm like, okay. So I went running out the front door, like throwing my workout clothes, went running out the front door to the rescue until I saw the lake from my front porch to hers. We had gotten 54 inches of water that night. Yeah. So I'm running back to my husband and I said, Dwayne, wake up, there's water in the front yard. And I look out the window, I said, wait, there's water in the backyard. It's all around, we're living on an island. So he woke up and I called Root back. And I said, you know what, you need to get in a bag anything that you have to have, like medicine or something, because I think you'll be at my house a while. And so she waited for me. And I know this is crazy, I got on my backpack and then I got my broom. I'm a hiker, and that was the best I could think of at the moment. And so the broom and I walked across the street like it was my walking stick, right? Can you just imagine this? And the water was up to my waist. Now, we were not in places where this was a reservoir that had overflowed. This was rainwater, and I could see about to my knees. So I could hope that there was nothing really weird in the water. I'm not recommending you do this. I walked across the street to her house, and when I walked in the living room, she had on her hat and a raincoat and an umbrella standing in her house. And she's a small little woman, and the water was up to here on her. Yeah. So, because I've done hurricane recovery work, I'm from New Orleans, I said, if everything in this house disappeared, what would break your heart to lose? And she said, the sari I got married in. Her husband had passed away. So I got the garbage bags out, and I put her sari in the garbage bag and carried it up to the attic. But it turned out that she had a lot of beautiful saris, and we carried them one after the other up to the attic. And then I thought we should take her pictures to the attic. And then I went over to the dining room table made out of beautiful wood. And you guys, I don't know why I did this, but I picked up the chairs that were sitting in the water, and I flipped them over. Now the top of the chair is in the water. You know, you do crazy things in a moment. That didn't help. So then I put the chairs on top of the table, and I realized the water was getting higher and higher. And it was starting to freak me out. So I said, let's get out of here. Walk behind me, hold onto my backpack, and don't walk anywhere I don't walk. So she was holding on to me, and I literally took one step at a time. It seemed like a really long ways. It couldn't have been any farther from where I'm standing now to that door, because we're right across the street from each other. But it seemed like I couldn't see the steps. I couldn't see the street, the sidewalk, the grass. She was with us for 3 days. Now, I'd like to think she would have called me anyway. Right? I'd like to think that even if I didn't know her, she would have known that I might have been, she could have imagined we could have helped her. But she didn't call anyone else, and there were neighbors all around her. Pretty soon water went down, we got to talking to Ellen and Peter, who lived next door to us. See, our houses are up higher. Roop has a house on the ground, like many others in our neighborhood. And I started talking to Ellen and Peter. They're from China, and we've always been friends with them, but now, after Harvey, we're really good friends with them. And I'm here to tell you that even as I have been here, Ellen has texted to see if I could get the package off her porch. She's got one of those cameras, you know, where she can see what's on her porch, and she thinks I'm at her beck and call. I mean, being a neighbor is very inconvenient. It's very inconvenient. I'm not kidding. And we watched next door, the house on the other side, which was empty during Harvey. It's a rental home. We watched, and no one came to really clean it out. But people were looking for a place to live after Harvey. And they went in there and they painted over it without doing the mold remediation or anything. Yeah, you feel it. And Rachel, who's a single mother, and her 7-year-old daughter, Lily, moved in. I hate that for them, but they don't have anywhere else to live, really. And so all of us are helping Rachel Ellen and Peter, Roop, Dwayne and I are helping Rachel with Lily. She lost her keys in the car the other day just as I was heading to the airport to go to North Carolina. I had to show her how to do Lyft because she didn't know. She's young, she should have known this. You guys, the thing is being a neighbor is hard. It's a hassle. But this is our call, right? Love your neighbor as yourself. This is what we're made to be and do. This isn't something that is a nice idea. This is what it's about. It's about God and loving our neighbor as ourselves, even when it's messy. I'm calling you into this. Hear this from me, please. When we talk about adaptive leadership, it starts with us and how we lead ourselves in our own neighborhoods, even when the neighbors are a hassle, really. Okay, now I'm going to ask you to go back to work on your tic-tac-toe board. I know, you know where I'm going with this, right? This is your congregation, and I'm wondering who lives around the church. Here's what I want to ask you to do. Don't stop if there's a highway. Don't stop if you think what's across the street is a strip shopping center, or if it's a rural community and maybe you're so lucky that there is a winery across the street. Some of you probably have this here, right? That would be nice. But think about who your neighbors are and fill them in for me. And if you don't know their names, put in there what you know about them. Maybe in one direction there's a Hmong community, or maybe it's I was hearing there's an Eastern Indian population by some of you. Fill it in, please. Go to work on that. Do you need more time? You've got it? Raise your hand if you're done so I'll know. Okay, 1 more minute and that's it, okay? So go ahead and finish up. Okay, friends, if I can bring us back together. Thank you for doing this. I would love to ask to see how you're doing. And when I ask for a show of hands, please know this isn't a matter of making any of you feel badly if you don't know your neighbors. It's an opportunity for those who do to celebrate. And here's a saying I have. And I'm giving you this as a gift. Are you ready? Take this into your heart. I don't have to feel like crap because you're doing great. Do you hear me? I don't have to feel bad because you're doing well. I can celebrate with you. Do you see how important that is? If we are a community truly caring and telling the truth about each other, I can celebrate with you without feeling bad about me. This is a true community. Think about it with your children, with your parents, with your families. You want to come together and raise each other up, not because that makes me feel worse about me. So we are not in competition. We are one church in this space. Yeah, that's right. We're in one church. That's right. And so we can build each other up. Who's got 9 of their boxes filled, or 8 of your boxes filled in? I see some hands. We've got about a fourth of the room. Well done. Well done. Who has 7? Let's see. Put your hands up. Be proud of the work you've done meeting your neighbors. We've got another hand up. 6? Good. 5? Okay, well done. 4? Good. 3? Yes. 2? Who knows one of their neighbors? Okay, thank you for sharing this, and thank you for being willing to be honest with each other. We can help each other get to know the neighbors around our congregations. For those of you that have gotten to know your neighbors, I'm just really curious about it. How did you do it? Anybody who has a relationship with their neighbor, could we spend a minute with you coming to the microphone and telling us what helped you make that connection? I see one back there.
Peggy Ogden Howe in Georgetown. I do yard work out in our corner and get really grungy, and people walk by and they talk to me with my grungy garden clothes.
Awesome. So she was her real self when she met her real neighbors. Awesome.
I've been attending the neighborhood association meetings at our community around the church, not my own neighborhood, for about 4 or 5 years, and I've gotten to know some folks that way.
That's great. Neighborhood association meetings. We'll come over here and then to the middle. We can't hear you. I don't know what's going on there. Just
Dave Koppel, Palm Valley, Round Rock. Every March 14th, it's 314, like the number pi, 3.14. I bake pies for all my neighbors and bring them over.
Oh,
it works.
I want to be his neighbor. Yeah, that's pretty nice. Okay.
When I moved into my new neighborhood, bought a house about a year and a half ago. And I was just standing in the yard waiting for the movers to come, and my next door neighbor's husband was standing out in the yard, and I just walked over and said, "Hi, I'm your new neighbor," and introduced myself, and we got to know each other, and I met his wife and his boys, and they take care of my cats when I'm gone. And then I met the man and his wife next door, Kenny, and they have a little girl, and I watch her play up and down the street. I live on a cul-de-sac. And I bought a new lawnmower last year, and I couldn't get it out of the car. And the man that lives across the street, he's moved in about 2 weeks after I did. And I walked over and I said, "Can you help me? I can't get this lawnmower out of the car." And he came over and he picked it up. And so I know my neighbors, and we watch out for each other.
Thank you so much. That's awesome. That's awesome. Bishop.
So after leading congregations to the Missional River, I figured I needed to learn my own neighborhood. So I actually joined a community development advisory committee that gives out block grants, and then I ended up on the HOA board and becoming the president for a while. And I can tell you that is a great way to get to know your neighbors. The good, the bad, and the ugly, and to begin to shape the culture a little. So I would invite you to say it's not all bad.
That is so fun. Okay, here's what I'd like you to do. I'd like you to reflect on this question. The question really is, how does your church add value to the neighborhood? Or another way to ask that is, why should the people around your church care that you are there? Why should they care that you're there? I once worked with a congregation that will remain nameless, where we practiced listening, and the pastor and the youth minister went into the neighborhood nearby them to get to know their neighbors, and they decided they would go into the trailer park. Now, when you're walking in the trailer park in this place, if you turn, you can see the steeple of the church, right? It's right there. I mean, trailers are small, steeples are big. It was right there. And everywhere they went, they asked, "What do you know about our church?" And everywhere they went, guess what the people said? "What church? Where is it?" And they pointed to the steeple. And very discouraged, the pastor called me and he said, "You know what? No one even knows we're here, and we're the biggest church in the city. It's a small town, and this church is invisible to the neighbors. Why would people care that your church is there?" That's what I want you to talk about. Please, I'm going to give you a few minutes for that conversation. Are you done with this? Have you finished this conversation? Friends, if I can pull us back together. Thank you. Thank you for coming back together. Thank you for having this conversation. The truth is, the sad truth is, nobody's expecting very much from us. They aren't. And so we can actually surprise people by caring about them. You know, the commodity the church trades on is relationships. That's what we do. When we are at our best, we love like Jesus. And we do it with the people in our congregation, and we do it with the people around us. When we are at our best, that's the kind of people we are. And yet no one is expecting us to show up. And I'll share more stories tomorrow, but when people actually do walk across the street and meet their neighbor, the biggest surprise, honestly, is that people showed up to care, to listen. I'm not talking about carrying the church bulletin over and handing it to someone, or you know what I mean. That's not our style anyway. Largely, if we can just show up to introduce ourselves, like I was hearing some of you have done. There are basically two kinds of churches, and this comes from Jonathan Brooks, and I love, love, love this quote. There are basically two kinds of churches. Those who have no other place to go, and those who have no other place they'd rather be. Those who have no other place to go, we're stuck on this corner. We're stuck in this community. Although we have a great cemetery. Just saying, right? We're here, and we have no place else to go. We're just stuck. We're declining. We're dying. There's nothing left here. We have no place else to go. We just are waiting out our time. Or congregations that have no place else they'd rather be, because in this corner, in this community, in this small town, there are people who need us here, who need us to show up for the children, who need us to show up for the elderly, for the sick, for the people who are wrestling with suicide, who are recovering from whatever challenge life has given them, right? Because life is fragile. And the truth is that we are experts in that. We're people of the cross. And we can step into this fragile space if we can just be real with each other. We can do it better than anybody else. This is what we're called to do. This is our window of opportunity to care, to love like Jesus. It is exactly what we're called to do. To take our traditions, which are really amazing traditions, if you think about it, the very best of the best of who we are, and our vision of who we might be, and push that together into something that looks like caring about the place we're located. You guys, you're where you are for a reason. Your congregation has not outlived its purpose in its neighborhood. You've just forgotten it. We have a reason to be where we are. And I encourage you to let that sit on your heart as you sort out why you exist as a congregation. So many times as I am invited in, or others on our team are invited in to consult and coach and work with leaders like yourselves, what we find is once we start digging around and listening, really listening to each other, that vision emerges. What God has called us to do and be is already happening within us. No different than Pastor Sarah Yoder, who discovered the opioid addiction in the community before she found it in her own church. It was already there, right? But actually, she needed the neighborhood to hold up the mirror so she could see it. She could see how God was already calling them into this. There is a vision like that for your place. I have no doubt about it. Many of you are already living into it. And I'm excited for what you're doing. And if you're still wondering, man, dig into this. Don't let it go by. Tomorrow when I meet with you, I have one session, and we are going to focus on the faithful metrics work. This is how we rethink the metrics we're using to judge what makes a successful congregation. And so we're going to dig into that together. There's a book on this available, and I'll be really excited to share this material with you tomorrow. But as we close, I'd like to close with a word of prayer about what it means to be the church right now in this place and time, recognizing how fragile our lives truly are. Let us pray. God, you've called us to be your people right now in this space as we discover and actually admit to ourselves our own weaknesses, our own brokenness, the things we actually would rather avoid in our own personal lives and in the life of our congregations. And as that soaks in on us, let it be actually what drives us back out with courage to be your people in this day and time. Lord, let our own pain and our own suffering, our own insecurities be exactly the places in which we find you so that we have the hope to lead. As we think about our neighborhood, whether it is the neighborhood where we live every day or the neighborhood where we worship and serve in your name, help us to have the courage to live boldly into our call to be your people. All these things we lift up to you now, knowing and trusting that you're way ahead of us, leading the way. In your name we pray. Amen. Thank you, Dick. You bet. Yeah, you bet.
Thank you, Peggy, again. I hope you all will continue these